HarperCollins presents Den of Spies, Reagan, Carter, and the Secret History of the Treason That Stole the White House, by Craig Unger, read by Jason Culp. To Kim and for Bob Parry and those who fight for the truth. The obscure we see eventually. The completely obvious, it seems, takes longer. Edward R. Murrow. Author's note. This book is the product of hundreds of interviews and research that took place on and off over a period of more than 33 years. However, it would not exist in its present form without the landmark work of Bob Parry, whom I came to regard as a friend and colleague until his death in 2018. Bob did more than any other journalist to make sure the October surprise was not lost to history, and his widow, Diane Dustin, was enormously generous in providing me access to Bob's archives, which are such an important part of this book. Prologue. Some years ago, a new acquaintance asked me how it was that I had been consumed by the October surprise for such a long time. He was referring to a story that for years I'd been unable to get out of my head about a covert operation in which the Reagan-Bush campaign made a secret deal with Iran that sabotaged the 1980 presidential election. It was a great story involving spies, cover-ups, and an act of treason that took place at the highest levels of government. It had also never been proven, at least not in the minds of most Americans. As a journalist, one tends to move from one story on to the next. But this was different. I had started investigating it in 1991, and to be honest, I had been on and off it ever since. It became the background noise to my life as a journalist, something between a hobby and a part-time obsession. I've long thought that much of what we see on the news is merely spectacle and theater, and that we rarely get a glimpse of the unseen ways in which power really works, behind the curtain. In that regard, the October surprise was a masterclass. There were double agents, betrayals, covert operations, cutouts, illegal arms deals, and mysterious deaths. A hall of mirrors designed to obscure the truth, it was a case study in how to hijack American foreign policy, steal the presidency, and get away with it. All with no fingerprints. The specific allegations dated back to the 1980 presidential election between the Republican ticket of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush versus Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale. At the time, Iran held 52 American hostages who had been incarcerated at the American embassy in Tehran during Iran's Islamic Revolution. The fate of those hostages became a national obsession and arguably the most important issue of the 1980 election, a crisis unfolding in real time, the resolution of which would determine who held the most powerful office in the world. The accusations were jaw-dropping. As the 1980 presidential campaign neared the end, Republican operatives did something extraordinary to make sure the hostage crisis played out in their favor. They made a secret deal to send weapons worth millions of dollars to Iran. At the time, of course, the Republicans were not even in power, so they had no governmental or legal authority to make any agreement whatsoever with Iran. Even if they'd had that right, the Carter administration had imposed an arms embargo against Iran as a terrorist state, making the deal illegal on multiple grounds. But even worse than the illegal arms deal itself was that, in return for these weapons, the Republicans had supposedly demanded a quid pro quo from the mullahs of Iran. They would get the arms to Iran, but in return, the Americans would remain in Iranian custody even longer. That's right. The Republicans were bribing Iran to prolong the captivity of the hostages. If the hostages were released,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?